What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Light and Lamp Podcast. I am here with Steve,
Hello.
as usual, and this week we're going to be talking about a bunch of stuff. We're going to start in the East, and boy, the team that just can't seem to get it right for some reason. So, the Flyers, right? I mean, I don't know about you, but I thought they had a pretty good offseason, all things considered. I thought they bought in some pieces to this team and shipped out some pieces on this team that addressed a lot of the problems that I thought they were going to have or that they had last year. One of their, obviously, the bigger acquisitions of the offseason was acquiring Rasmus Ristolainen from the Buffalo Sabres. They traded Jacob Voracek for Cam Atkinson, who Cam Atkinson has been nothing short of great for them. He's leading the team in goals. He's currently got 15 goals already. He's on
They
pace for a
also
30
traded for
goal
Ryan
season.
Ellis.
Yeah, they got Ryan Ellis, who unfortunately has been hurt most of the year. Keith Yandel they also acquired. So, they made moves here to kind of address a lot of the problems that they had last year, which we had noted several times was just like a complete lack of defense in the middle of the ice. And yet, in spite of all that, and they also, earlier in this season, they changed coaches. AV got big boot upside the head, so he's gone. All of that has amounted to basically absolutely nothing. They're currently sitting with a 13, 19, and 8 record. They are currently sitting, they are 14 points outside of the last wild card spot, with the Bruins having 3 games in hand over them. Their goals against, they are at a negative 36 for their goals differential. Nothing really, like in the grand scheme of things, nothing is really going all that well for them. In terms of goals for, they are towards the bottom of the league in that respect. They are, 31st, or 32nd, 31st, 30th, 29th, 28th. They're 27th in the NHL for goals for, so they're not really scoring that much. And they are 32nd, 31st, 30th, 29th, 28th in goals against. So, literally nothing.
Literally nothing is going well.
Right. So, I guess I'll just start off, in general. What are you seeing from this team is going wrong? What is it? Obviously, a lot, right? Everything, right? But, what specifically are you noticing when you're watching this team? What the hell is happening that they just can't win games?
I mean, it's a lot of the same things they've been having problems with the last couple of years. They can't defend, and they can't defend well enough to hold on to a lead, and they don't score enough to be able to overcome a deficit. So, even if they get a lead early in a game, they never hold on to it. So they just, I don't know. They changed coaches, and they still can't win. So I don't know what's wrong with this team.
There was a lot being made about Carter Hart last year having not so great of a season. What do you think? Do you think he's part of the problem? Do you think he's been not an issue? What do you think about the goaltending in Philadelphia?
Well, I mean, he hasn't been great. I mean, nobody in Philly's been great, I'd say. So on some nights, I think he's part of the problem, but on other nights, I would say he's holding up his end of the deal, and the team's letting him down. So it's tough to say. He's also young too, so the inconsistencies in his game seem to be a little more exaggerated now because how bad the team is too.
Yeah, and what I'll say to the point of the goaltending in Philadelphia, which a lot of people are saying, oh, it's just a goalie thing, right? They don't have a goalie there. The goalies aren't good enough. I mean, not for nothing. How many goalies have played for this team over the last 3 seasons? I mean, they went there one season. They had 8 or 9 different goalies start a game for them. They set an NHL record in some such ridiculous manner with 8 or 9 different goalies having started a game for them. They got a different backup goalie this year. Martin Jones is in his first year in Philadelphia. When you're running through upwards of 10 different goalies in 3 years, and none of them seem to work out, that's probably a really good indication that goaltending is not the problem. Like, if you have 10 different guys who are all putting up similar stats, that tells you that there's something going on and it's not the goalies that are the problem. It's telling you that like your system is failing in some way, shape, or form, or the roster is failing in some way, shape, or form. There's something wrong here because you keep it's like when you're it's like if you're it's like if you're having car troubles and you kept replacing the like you kept replacing your brake pads, but like you were still having car problems, and you're like, I don't get it. Like the brake pad, I got new brake pads. Like I don't understand. Like why isn't the car fixed? It's like, hey idiot, it's not the brake pads and then like, um, I do want to ask, do you think that this is like a roster problem, or do you think that this is a system or a coaching problem, or both?
I think it might be a little bit of both. I mean, the Flyers did their best this offseason to bring in some new blood and to remove some guys that they felt, I guess, were underperforming. I mean, they traded a long-time player, Jake Voracek, because I think they just felt they needed a shake-up in the room, but I don't know if necessarily it's been for the better. I mean, Cam Atkinson's been good, but like the team overall isn't in a better place than it was when it still had Jake Voracek, you know? And it's hard to say, like, the AV system clearly did not work with them. And like they're struggling now even under like their interim head coach, but I don't know if it's time to tear it all down in Philly, but I mean, I think as a general manager after these last 2 seasons, you really have to take a long, hard look at like your roster and see if realistically it is a roster problem. You know what I mean? Because I couldn't tell you. Like, I don't watch enough Flower games to tell you who's underperforming night in and night out. But I could definitely say, like, from an outside perspective, there was a coaching problem at least. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was somewhat of a roster disconnect as well.
Like when I look at this roster, right? It it seems like a roster that like on paper would be seeing much more success than what we're seeing, right? Because like on paper they have a really strong lineup of several really good centers. Like you have Sean Couturier, Claude Giroux, Kevin Hayes, Derek Brassard's not a bad like third or fourth line center. Um, Scott Lawton's not a bad fourth line center. Now again, like take it for what it is. A lot of everyone's been having injury slash COVID problems. Like I know Couturier's been in and out of the lineup with injury slash COVID problems. So I just like, but even like at the start of the year when this team was relatively healthy, they were like severely underwhelming in a lot of ways. And then they have like decent wingers like Cam Atkinson. He's on pace for a 30-goal season. You got guys to like JVR, Travis Konechny, Oscar Lindblom. Then you have your role players like Nate Thompson. Like I think on paper this is a really good forward group. I mean on paper the defense should be much better than it is. You got Provorov, Sanheim, Ellis, Braun, Yandel, Ristolainen. Like Cam York has even been pretty good for them, and then obviously Carter Hart. We know what he could potentially do in net. I look at this roster and I don't really see like glaring problems, but I think a lot of it is a coaching thing. I really do. I think like there's it's funny because I see a lot of like the Islanders in this roster, right? Like realistically speaking, from like a purely talent perspective, there's not like a super. This isn't like a super talented group, right? Like obviously guys like Claude Giroux and Sean Couturier are like two of the better players in our league. I'm not saying anything about like Sean Couturier is like a top 5 two-way center in the NHL. Obviously Provorov and Sanheim are great defensemen and all that, but it's not like the Maple Leafs, right? Where like there's just like talent laden like up and down the roster where you got like skill guys like Marner and Nylander, Tavares, like that kind of thing. And so that kind of actually leads me to believe that this might just be simply not having the correct coaching staff, but I don't know. It seems like they've also tried several different coaches and still can't get the plane off the ground too. So it's very weird, kind of what's been going on. And that was going to be my next question. Like, do you think it's time to just rebuild? You know, because like in theory, right? Like they just rebuilt, it's like they're done rebuilding, but it's like a lot of your rosters still starting to age a bit. You know, guys
I
like
mean, they also didn't really get to reap the benefits of like quick rebuild that they did because the number 2 overall pick they have, they traded away
yeah.
because he never panned out. So I don't know. It might be time just to like accept the tank at least for this season and enter, the Shane Wright sweepstakes and just see what happens.
It's just like you have pieces of this roster that are starting to kind of get up there in age. I mean, Claude Giroux's 34. You know, he's starting to near what we would consider like the end of his physical prime, if he's not already out of his physical prime, depending on who you would ask. Um, this is weird. I was trying to go on cap friendly, but it seems like they're having a bit of a weirdness going on because I only see 6 teams. So cap friendly is unfortunately not available right now. But you know, Giroux is 34. Um, Couturier, he's not old. He's 29, but like he's starting to enter into that like physical prime where he would theoretically wanting to be on like competitive teams. Kevin Hayes, the same thing. He's 29. Um, but they also have like a weird mix of youth too, because you got guys like Provorov and Sanheim who are like 25, and you know Carter Hart's only 23. So like they have this weird mix of like youth with veterans, which in theory is a really good team. You know, or is a really good thing. It's a really good thing to have a mix of you know the energetic youth with like the balanced veterans who bring that kind of balance to the lineup. That's what you want from a competitive team, but it doesn't seem like they're really going anywhere. Um, I don't know. I don't know if it's time to like fully just tank and go into a complete rebuild, but it might be time to consider that whatever vision this roster was built around might just not function. Uh, it just might not work, like, period. Because, I
I
mean,
mean, it's clearly flawed at the very least.
like, when they were in the bubble, right? Like, they were a really good team going into that bubble 2 years ago. Went into the second round, took the Islanders all the way to 7 games after being down 3-1 with back-to-back overtime wins, including I think one of them was like a triple overtime or something, like just super painful to watch. But I'm trying to find where is their season by season record. There it is. So if we go back like 5 years, right, to 2017, they've been in the playoffs twice. They've won one series, and it just seems like super inconsistent. Like, did not qualify, lost in the first round. Did not qualify, lost in the second round. Did not qualify. Looks like they're probably not going to qualify this year. It just doesn't seem like whatever the vision for this roster was supposed to be. I mean, I guess it was supposed to be. I don't know. It's kind of weird. Like, I don't even really know what this team is supposed to be, like, in theory.
I think that kind of might be the problem right there is like you're not sure if this team built like on the principles of like speed and skill or if it's like supposed to be a hard grinding like traditionally like Flyers hockey team. And that's probably why they haven't had a lot of success because like every coach they've brought in has tried to fit one of those molds or the other, but like the roster's never fully transitioned into one of those teams. So like you're never going to get the full like benefit of all these players playing at their best, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's a question like what like if you were the general manager, like what would you be doing in this particular instance? Like what's your next move? Because most likely, barring some kind of miracle, the playoffs are not an option this year, right? So like, what are you doing going forward?
I mean, I think you sell the deadline a little bit, get rid of some guys like Heavy Handle, anything that can help you get some picks in the upcoming draft, and then you really just take it into the offseason and see how it goes. I mean, You see who becomes available, if you have any money available, where you can upgrade, if there are any upgrades available. Realistically, I mean, I don't know if I have any like concrete first moves other than finding a new head coach.
Um, yeah, because really the last coach that I can remember having like sustained success with this team was Laviolette, right? From 2009 2013. He brought them to the playoffs a couple times. They were a decent team. You know, Craig Berube lasted 2 years. Dave Haxtell lasted 3 years. Scott Gordon was an interim, so he doesn't really count. AV lasted a little less than 2 years, or a little over 2 years, and now you have Mike Yo. So you've had like your last like 5 coaches just weren't even really worth like discussing all that much. I mean, AV had the one good year, like I said, when they went to the bubble and they, took down just a 7 game. But other than that, they were like incredibly underwhelming. I completely, honestly, it kind of skipped my mind that Craig Berube was the coach of this team. Uh, I don't think Mike Yo is the answer because, quite honestly, I don't think Mike Yo is a very good coach.
I mean, Mike Yo's record is not all that great. I mean, if you look at his time in Minnesota
I just
and his time in St. Louis before he got the axe.
I don't know. I just feel like he just keeps getting these jobs, but where he's getting these like
Why people keep giving him another shot when he keeps like, and it's not like he's coached bad teams and has had like an iffy record, and people keep thinking, oh well, maybe this with a better roster you can get a better shot. I mean, like that Minnesota team was fairly decent. They should have gone further than they did. And then he took the reins of the St. Louis team and almost tanked them completely. And like that team turned around and won the Stanley Cup that next season, like or that same season after they fired him. You know?
Yeah, I mean, he took over the Minnesota Wild kind of right when, uh, in theory, right, they should have been good because that was like very shortly after they signed Parise and Suter, if I'm correct.
Yeah, it was like 2013, I think, or 2014.
Yeah, because their first season was 2012 2013, and Mike Yo was the head coach starting in 2011 2012. So he was there in the 2013-14 season when they got, so you could say, oh, his first 2 years, that Minnesota team wasn't that good, right? But then they came and they got, they shelled out for these big bucks, right? The big players. And then lost in the first round, lost in the second round, lost in the second round. Like, then he got canned.
Yeah, I mean, that's really it. And then you look at what he did, and like I think he literally lasted half a season in St. Louis before he got canned.
He went there in 2016-17, like halfway through, had the full year in 2017-18, fifth in the Central, missed the playoffs, and he got fired in 2018-19.
Yeah. Okay, so he was there a little longer than I thought he was, but I
Just
mean,
like,
still, he took a team in St. Louis that had consistently been in the playoffs and somehow managed to miss the playoffs twice and have them in last place at the beginning of 2018.
I mean, if this isn't the face of success, I don't know what is right here.
I mean, listen, he keeps. I mean, honestly, guys like Mike Yo give me hope because, like, it just shows that no matter how terrible you are at your job, if you know the right people, you'll continue to get hired. Because, like, I mean, he's not getting hired on merit. Like, I'm sorry, he's just not. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like I'm not gonna take anything away from him from his assistant coaching career. Like, I,
Right.
I
Yeah, he
believe he
might
was a
be.
Stanley Cup champion as an assistant coach, if
I
I'm
mean,
correct.
and like, he might just be a very good assistant coach. And
Right,
there's nothing
there's
wrong
nothing
with
wrong with
that.
that. Yeah, exactly.
But it's like being the world's greatest rhythm guitar player, right? And then all of a sudden you want to be a lead guitar player and you're not very good at it, but you keep trying anyway. It's like maybe you should just settle into your role as a really good assistant coach and you'll get probably more consistent, more, you know, that's probably it. You're probably get more consistent work, honestly. Like you're not going to constantly be getting hired and fired by these teams in like such short order because they're like, oh, Mike Yo seems to know what he's doing. Oh, he has no idea. Never mind.
And you're fired. Um, so I like looking forward into the draft, right? So like obviously number one is find a coach, right? And I do think that would change a lot of things because let's be honest here, this would pretty much be a very similar discussion that we would have been having about the New York Islanders prior to Barry Trotz's hiring, right? Where you're like, look, they're not that bad on paper. They should be like a wild card team, maybe, but like they just suck, right? And a great coach can really change everything. Now, obviously, Barry Trotz is like arguably either the best or second best coach in the NHL, so you're really not gonna find like a gem in the rough like him unless I don't know some team decides to go ahead and fire like unless like for some reason the Tampa Bay Lightning are like fuck you John Cooper and like he gets the boot in Tampa Bay. Um, but I do think that like if Philadelphia shelled out the money, which I mean to be fair they shelled out a fair amount of money for Alain Vigneault, right? But I think if Philadelphia like really like shells out the money and gets like a top 10 coach in the NHL, we really could see this whole roster get turned around. So I do get like obviously number one is find a coach. Don't find a coach on the cheap. Don't go to like the bargain bin and start looking around and be like,
Hey man,
ooh.
John Tortorella is still looking for a job.
I think that he wouldn't be the worst coach for this team, honestly. Like as much as I don't like the way his tenure in Columbus ended, where he was like hell bent on getting fired, like he was trying to like speed run unemployment, like save frames from cashing in his unemployment check. Like as much as I don't like the way that it ended there, I think that he could actually work really well with this team, just because like they don't really have superstars, really. I don't think he'd really butt heads with anybody that much because even like their quote unquote superstars like Claude Giroux, he doesn't really strike me as a guy that would like butt heads with anybody. Like we never really
Yeah.
heard like Claude Giroux having an issue with like his coaching or whatever. Um, they've got pretty good defense. I mean, Sanheim, Provorov, of course, like he would immediately try to like turn them into shot blockers, so like their offensive production would dip. But they've got like a strong defensive base. They've got strong centers, including one of the best two-way centers in the NHL, which we know that is something that John Tortorella would have absolutely loved for his time in Columbus. I don't know. I think Tortorella wouldn't be necessarily a bad fit for this roster. I think they should take a serious look into getting him. It'd be really funny too because like how many times he tried to fight Peter Laviolette when
I
he
think
was
the
a
other thing
Rangers
really
head
too is
coach.
like John Tortorella is like known for taking like veteran teams that have struggled and like getting them over the hump. You know what I mean? Like turning them into winners. Like that's why he got the job in New York when he did. That's why he got the job in Vancouver. They thought he could get them over the hump with an aging team. So like with Philly having, like you said, like so many veterans, like it wouldn't be the worst thing to have a guy who comes in and is just like, listen, I need you guys to run the room, but like I'm the boss. Like, and if he's nothing else, if not gonna teach them defensive responsibility, like, which is something this team desperately needs.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and like I said, a lot of the knocks on Tortorella is that he's not good with the skill guys, right? He butts heads with the superstars, and that eventually he just runs his course, right? And the guys just get tired. His teams are just exhausted, and they can't do what he needs them to do anymore. I don't really think those first two things would be much of an issue because, again, like there really isn't a superstar on this team. You know, there are really good players. Like I'm not taking anything away from Claude Giroux, Sean Couturier, Ivan Provorov, Travis Sanheim, but he doesn't have to deal with like a Connor McDavid or a Mitch Marner or even like an Artemi Panarin, right? Like somebody whose job it is to go out and score points, and they're known to do that, and they're considered a star in this league. And he doesn't even really have to deal with a personality like Patrick Laine or like a PK Subban, who we know would have issues with all of a sudden being told to play a completely different way. I feel like a lot of the personalities on this team would fit. I mean, we really don't see anybody with like a detrimental personality to his coaching type. Like everybody knew that Patrick Laine thing wasn't going to work. Like
Oh
that,
yeah,
like that was written on the wall. As it wasn't even written on the wall. It was like printed and like painted onto the wall in like 78 font. Like this isn't going to happen. Um, but even the guys that are more like skill type players, like Cam Atkinson played under John Tortorella, so like he knows what to expect.
he had his best years under John Tortorella too. So
And not for nothing, like could it get worse? Let's be honest here. What's the worst thing that happens? You get there and it doesn't work. Like,
Yeah, I mean, it's true. Like, how much worse can it get?
it's not like when he went to Vancouver and Vancouver was still like a playoff team for the most part who had aspirations of winning a Stanley Cup, right? So there was a high cliff to fall off of from Vancouver. Like he took them from a playoff team to like bottom of the basement. What's he gonna do to Philadelphia? Take them from the basement to the basement? Like yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like there's nothing really to.
There's not much lower to get. Yeah.
um. So speaking about the draft, because you said like going to the draft, like what's the kind of player that you think this team could really use? Like maybe not even name names. Like if you have the list up, you can talk about name. But like what kind of
I mean,
player
I think
does
they
this
just
team
need to
need?
find. I think they just need a high-end number one center, like what they were hoping Nolan Patrick was going to be. Claude Giroux was that guy maybe 10 years ago, but they need a replacement for him, and their first replacement failed. So I think it's really time they prioritize getting somebody who could be like that elite talent. Because like you said, this is a pretty talent poor roster. So adding, and it's already what's it called? It's already a team that's strong down the middle. So adding some more depth there can never hurt, especially when that depth could turn out to be like elite talent. Like a guy like Shane Wright who's supposed to be number one.
Yeah, I think that adding talent is never a bad thing. And there are a lot of teams that are very talent rich, and it seems like there are a lot of teams that are very talent poor. And sometimes, like, people are like, oh, you can't add, like, too much of a high end talent to a team that's, like, defensively focused because it's not going to work. But, I mean, the bottom line, end of the day, is, like, you need somebody that's going to go out there and create chances and score goals, put the puck in the net, you know? Even a team like the New York Islanders has found a way to work Matt Barzal into their system. Or not really work. Like Barry Trotz has found a way to work his system to work with Matt Barzal. Matt Barzal's still, he's not putting up the 85 points that he was under Doug Weight, but he's a significantly better defensive player, and he's still putting up 60, 65 points. Like you need somebody that's going to go out there and create chances because, bottom line, end of the day, it doesn't matter how well you can defend, which the Flyers can't defend at all, but it doesn't matter how well you can defend if you're losing every game 1-0, 2-1, 3-2. Like you need somebody to shake things up. And when you have all these players like Claude Giroux and Sean Couturier and Kevin Hayes and Scott Lawton and even Derek Brassard, who aren't like necessarily the most talented players in the world, they all kind of fit a pretty similar mold, all things considered. You've got to try something different. Like, I don't think they need any more defensemen because, they have Risto, Sanheim, Provorov. Like, those three, being the age that they are, can carry them. And obviously Cam York, too. He's only, 21?
19 or 20, I think, yeah.
So, like, you don't need any more defensemen. You don't need another goaltender because, as we've established, goaltending is not the problem. So, yeah, I would agree. I think, ideally, you get a high-end elite center, a talent-driven center. But if all else fails, say like Shane Wright gets off the board, whatever, right? And the next center is on this list, anyways, predicted at number 5. Maybe you look into a guy like Ivan Miroshichenko, who's supposed to just be like the next Alex Ovechkin, basically, right? Just like one of the best shots in the draft, right?
I mean, I think it's their goal should be to add talent, period, like at any position. Well,
Yeah.
any
Well, besides
forward position,
defense,
realistically.
yeah.
But like, I think they should prioritize a center. But like
Oh
you
yeah.
said, like they should
Oh
just be
yeah.
trying to get whatever they can get their hands on, right? Like you can't be disappointed with the top 5 pick, no matter what it is.
Yeah, and I mean, like, you could always bump Giroux over to wing. You put whatever center you get on your second or third line, right? You bump Giroux over to wing. You give Couturier the first line center because he's good enough to do that. Yeah, I definitely think center would be the obvious, like, goal. But if your choice is between, like, a center in the mold of Sean Couturier versus a winger in the mold of an Ovechkin, I think you definitely go for the winger that's going to put the puck in the back of the net, Just, I don't know. I feel like I'm kind of done believing in his team because, like, every year I'm like, this is it. They address the problems. They're going to get back into playoffs. Like, every year they just they just proved me wrong. It's just, they come out and they're just like, yeah, we're the Flyers, and we're in the basement again. It's like,
It really is like one big like it really is like they spit in our face at the beginning of every season. Because we're both like, yeah, we we're rooting for you. Like not rooting for you because both our teams hate them like vehemently. But it's like,
I hate them as a team, yeah, but it's like, I think
but
you're
it's like I think they
good.
should be decent. Yeah, like on paper you should be all right. And I don't even know who the GM is anymore. Just comes out and just spits in each of our faces, and we're like, okay, well, I guess that's how this is going this year.
It's still Chuck Fletcher? Yeah, it's Chuck Fletcher.
But it's just like, I mean, I don't know how Chuck Fletcher still has a job.
Because they're convinced it's not a roster or a thing, or it's like, I guess the ownership is just convinced that
I feel like
they're just like, bro, team just needs to be better, bro. He's done everything he can. It's like, no, he hasn't. He's failed to secure you a head coach worth a damn, and he's failed to adequately match the head coach with the team, and then he's failed to add bona fide talent to the team. He's like, no offense to guys like Kevin Hayes or, you know, Keith Yandle or anything like that, but it's like you're not exactly adding that kind of spark and that kind of talent. You're not adding like an William
Austin
Nylander
Matthews or
yeah.
something. Yeah. I think the other thing realistically is like at this point, like why not just clean house? I mean, you've hit the philosophy clearly has is failed at some on some level, you know. So like why not just start with a clean slate, new general manager, new head coach, get everybody on the same page from the beginning and see where you can go from there, you know? Instead of like continually like kneecapping your head coach search because you have to fit him to like the vision that Chuck Fletcher has for this team, which clearly isn't working. I mean, Chuck Fletcher, if I'm remembering correctly, was the general manager of the Minnesota Wild as well, right around the time that Mike Yeo was the head coach.
Oh yeah, man, that's a great combination
I'm
right
pretty
there.
sure you could fact check me on that, but I'm almost positive he was the general manager in Minnesota for a hot minute.
Let's see, Chuck Fletcher. He was the GM from 2009 to 2018 of the Minnesota Wild.
Okay, yeah, so exactly. Coinciding in the period where they should have been a highly competitive team, and on paper, every year were a good team and couldn't get it done. Wow. I'm amazed I actually remembered that fact that I was able to like link that all together. I was like, oh, okay. But yeah, like
A
I
match
think it's just
made
time
in
to clean
hell,
house.
really.
Yeah, oh yeah, dude. It's like it's just the worst. It'd be like everywhere. I'm trying to think of like what other general manager and coach have like a. It'd be like everywhere that fucking Ken Holland went, Mike Babcock went. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It would just, which I mean, ironically enough, is like a thing. People are talking about Mike Babcock maybe going to Edmonton, and I'm like, that's just like the worst thing I've ever heard. But anyway, like it just like doesn't make sense. Like clearly it didn't, and maybe Chuck Fletcher's convinced it was a roster problem there. But it's like, I mean, you already have a struggling roster here. Why would you entrust it to a guy that couldn't get a good team over the hump?
And it's also like if it
Uh,
was a roster problem, that's your job to fix it too. So like,
yeah, like that's your. I mean, he's like obviously maybe he's like, well, that's why I got the can after 9 years. It's like, yeah, but you got 9 years to try to solve it, and you haven't figured it out. And like this is a team you've had for a pretty significant amount of time. And like you've probably been here since 28, whenever you got canned in Minnesota. So like that's
which,
5 years.
by the way, why would you hire the guy that did to the Minnesota Wild what he did? Like, why would you hire the guy that financially, or not financially, like cap space wise, bankrupt them for like 6 years, only to end up never making it past the second round? Like, what about that sounded appealing to you?
I mean, yeah. I mean,
Like,
but look what he did. Look what he did with the Flyers. He did exactly the same thing. He went out and traded for the rights to Kevin Hayes, and then signed Kevin Hayes for an absurd amount of money.
yeah, that's
It's
very
literally like
true.
it's the same blueprint. Like he went out and got like and like Kevin Hayes is in the same kind of mold that like Zach Parise is too. You know what I mean? Like a guy he's obviously bigger than him, like size wise, but like same kind of player where like they have a little bit of an edge to them. They play with they like to play a more meat and potatoes game, but they have some talent, like decent hands, can make some plays. And it's like, bro, it already didn't work in Minnesota with Zach Parise. You just signed a bigger, lazier Zach Parise. Like, why would you do that?
Just, ugh, ugh. I don't know. The Flyers are a mess. They make me mad. Um, they will probably be sellers at the trade deadline, and to kind of piggyback off of that, um, we can kind of mix them in with this conversation too. We've heard a lot of rumors that John Klingberg is probably on his way out of Dallas. Another team that like just consistently underperforms every single year.
Here's the thing with not sorry not to cut you off. I was just saying with
No, you're
Dallas,
good.
like that's another thing with the coach. Like that's like a coach who has a terrible track record that for some reason got it like a chance to like take the helm of the team. And I know in like his first time, like his first short tenure with the team, originally he had taken them to the Stanley Cup final after they fired Jim Montgomery. But it's like those were like extenuating circumstances.
Oh, you muted yourself. It's all right. Yeah, I mean, it's weird in a sense that like Dallas is again, they currently sit with a winning
Sorry,
record actually. No, you're good. Go
I
ahead
mean
and
Dallas,
finish
yeah.
your thought. I don't want
I would
to.
just say like so I was saying. Oh yeah, so like he. But if you look at Rick Bonus's career before he gets to Dallas there and takes over a team that was galvanized by forces really outside of their own control, like the firing of Jim Montgomery and like the way it went down, the fact that like it wasn't like a nasty split, like the team was still like we're playing for Jim kind of thing. Like cause it all came out because like his alcohol, like yeah, why he had to get fired, why he went into rehab and all that stuff. So like it seemed almost like there were forces outside of Rick Bowness that were like guiding that team on that run that year. And then every year after that, we've seen exactly what Rick Bowness has proven in his other time with other teams, which I think is the original Winnipeg Jets and the Arizona Coyotes in like the 90s, is that like he consistently underperforms the roster that's realistically more talented than he has it looking, you know?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, the Dallas Stars are another one of these teams that isn't like super talented, but as of the growing of their youngsters, has had like a shot in the arm of talent with guys like Jason Robertson specifically, being one of the best young players in the NHL. Um, Tyler
And
Sagan, like when he first got there, was still kind of a talent guy. He's kind of transitioned into this weird like I don't even know like what to call him, but you have like Miro Heiskanen, who's definitely would be considered a talented player.
he's been underperforming recently, and I wonder if it's like a coaching issue or if it's just like he's not jiving with like the system, or if it's really just like he's just slumping. Because like
Yeah,
he led the team in scoring in that run all the way to the Stanley Cup final, and then he hasn't really like. I mean, people were saying he was going to be like a Norris Trophy candidate, or at least in the conversation for a Norris Trophy, like consistently, like year after year, and he hasn't seemed to like gain that form again.
yeah. I
So
mean, he's got like 22 points in 36 games this year. Already on pace to beat what he did last year, where he had 27 points. But it his he hasn't been like as noticeable certainly, and his defensive game has certainly not rounded out to the point where they hoped it would. And like we were discussing yesterday, we were talking about in depth about like Cale Makar. Like, there's nothing wrong with being just an offensive player, but for a team that seems to pride itself on being like physical and in the trenches kind of guy, um, it seems like he just kind of gets lost sometimes in that kind of system, which again would bring it back to the coach, right? Like maybe it's just like the coach is just not, because for all intents and purposes, like he was playing really well under Jim
Jim
Montgomery.
Montgomery and Jim Montgomery had him in more of an offensive role. Like I don't think he had him make playing matchup minutes like at all. And Rick Bowness, like from what I can tell by like looking at his like ice time per game, like because obviously I don't watch a lot of Dallas Stars games, the
Yeah,
time
being out
zones
west.
and
Yeah,
but like clearly he's on the ice in almost every situation because like he leads the team in ice time, you know, or at least is very close to the top. So it's like maybe like you said, yeah, it could just be a mismatch in coaching and like I really wondered why Dallas didn't give Montgomery a second shot after he came back. You know what I mean? Because he took a coaching job. He's coaching in not like head coaching. I think he's an assistant coach in Detroit. with Jeff Blashill, which I mean, like, might have been his way of like getting his feet back in the game, you know. But like realistically, I don't know why Dallas doesn't just give him a call and be like, hey, like the boys are all here, like the band's still here. You want to come play with us, you know, and give him another shot because like that was the only time Dallas had stayed consistent in like recent memory.
I mean, you have to think that.
I mean, at the very least, they should kick the tires on it, right?
Yeah, I certainly would have just. We don't know. Maybe some behind the scenes thing. Maybe he said he didn't want to come back and head coach just yet. Maybe he's trying to, like you said, ease his way back in. But at the same time, you know, come back as an assistant coach. I would certainly have taken him in that role because you have to think, right? Like when Jim Montgomery went out halfway through that season, you have to think that Rick Bonus more or less just kind of stayed the course, and whatever system Rick Bonus was implementing, he just stayed with it, right?
Right.
You have half a season, you're a playoff team. Why rock the boat when things are going well? Just whatever Monty was doing, just let the boys do what they had to do. And it's really funny that the season after, immediately it became obvious that this was not the same team. So it
Yeah.
makes me think that like Rick Bonus implemented his system the following season. So like all the success he saw in that first season was basically just at the feet of Jim Montgomery because he was playing whatever system Monty had in place, and
I
he's
mean, he said
implemented
as
his
much.
system, and like it's just been a disaster.
Yeah, I mean, Rick Bonus has said as much. Like when they asked him in interviews when he took over from Jim Montgomery, he said like, "I'm not going to change anything. We're winning games. That would be stupid, you know? Like don't fix what isn't broken." But then, like you said, like now he's the guy. Like when they removed the interim tag, it's like, oh, time for me to get my fingerprints all over this team, and it's like, well, clearly that was a mistake. Like it wasn't like you just smudged the glass, bro. Like you like rubbed your whole face on it and ruined it. Like it's gonna
And
take a lot of work to like for whoever takes over to dig this team out of it, you know?
especially because a lot of their core pieces aren't really young. Obviously Jason Robertson is a great addition. He's having a great year, 35 points in 29 games. Rupe Hintz, Miro Heiskanen, like these guys aren't old by any stretch of the imagination, but of course you look at more of the core pieces of this team, and you're starting to kind of get up there a little bit. Like obviously Jake Ottinger's still young, but you look at Pavelski's 37, Ben is 32, Radulov's 35, Hudobin is 35. Sagan, 29, not old, but should be starting to be on a
But
more
what isn't
consistently competitive team.
young? Yeah.
And it's like you don't have another 3 to 5 years to fix this
No.
problem.
Oh no. Like this has to be like this is one of the very few times like you need to make an overnight fix for a team. You know what I mean? Like they have to come back next year and be like good. Because like you said, like they're only getting older and like guys like Jamie Benn who they relied on to score consistently like 30 goals every year have not he isn't the same player anymore.
No.
You know? Like he's still an energy guy. He still brings the physical element. He still brings all the leadership and the X factors, but like his production just isn't there anymore. So like you can't waste whatever he has left in the tank, you know? Like you have to get the most out of him now.
Yeah, and I mean the same with like Pavelski, right? It's like, okay, yeah, Pavelski's having a fantastic season. He got 16 goals, 40 points in 37 games. He's 37, Sometimes we see it where one season he has it and the next season you don't. So what happens if Joe Pavelski comes back next year, 38 years old, and he can't put the puck in the net? You know what I'm saying? Like you
Yeah.
can't.
I mean, is Alex Radulov still on the team, right? Yeah.
Yeah, he's
He's an
got one
expiring
goal
contract.
in 31 games.
Well, that's the other thing, right? Like that's another problem right there. That's a big piece that they count on in that top six. I mean, that top line, what was it, maybe 2, 3 years ago, was considered like not one of the best, but one of the better units as a whole, you know? When it was Ben, Sagan, and Radulov running with it was just John Klingberg at the time, but like now it's like both of those guys don't even crack like remotely the scoring numbers that they used to. I mean, like you said, one goal through how many games is not what you expect from Alex Radulov, who at the very least used to be a consistent 20 to 25 goal guy every year.
Yeah, and another piece of the puzzle that they thought they had fixed Dennis Gurionov, he's having kind of a struggle right now. He's only got 6 goals in 33 games. Um,
Rihanna's still young though.
yeah, he's only
Um,
24, so he's got time. But it just makes me wonder, like, we're pointing out all these guys that are like, obviously Ben's production had been on the decline for several years. But we're pointing out all these guys whose like production has all of a sudden gone off the cliff, right? And it's like maybe just Rick Bowness just needs to get canned, bro. Like,
yeah, I mean, your team is seemingly less defensively sound than it was, which makes no sense when you look at this team on paper because like that was the most successful element of their game when they went to the Stanley Cup final was how well they defended. And then you look at just like how negative how much of a negative impact he's had on the offensive production of his players. Probably from what I can imagine is trying to sacrifice their offense to make up for the lack of defense in his system. Just is not it ain't a Chief. I'm sorry, like it ain't.
I also have to think who's their general manager.
Jim Nill, if I remember correctly.
Let's see. I'm pretty sure you're correct.
I just remember he was like when he took over.
Yeah. So Jim Nill, right?
Yeah, because he came from Detroit. I remember he was like Ken Holland's like AGM for a while.
I I don't want to bring. I don't want to like start questioning. Well, I mean, it's kind of my job. I'm gonna question Jim Nill for a second here. Um, I know that like Hudobin was gonna be hurt to start the year, so they bought on Braden Holtby because Hudobin was gonna be hurt and all that. But does it not seem like a little unfocused to be going after goaltenders when you have other issues you need to be solving, and now you're riding 3 different goaltenders? And granted, like they've been, unfortunately for Anton Hudobin, who's been struggling with injury for us for most of this year, it kind of works out in the Stars' favor because they don't have to run this weird 3-headed monster. But like if Hudobin was healthy, what are you gonna do? You're gonna send Jake Ottinger back down to the AHL after all the things he's done for you. You're gonna like Jeremy Swayman him, for no reason. Like
They're gonna give him the old Spencer Knight.
it just kind of shows like a little bit of a lack of focus, in my opinion, from a management perspective when you're not addressing things that need to be addressed. It's like we've talked about a million times with the Edmonton Oilers, right? Like you're not fixing the problem. Like you have a broken arm, and so you're putting a cast on your leg. It's like
I mean, I agree with you. It is like, but it's like the one mistake I can really give Jim Nill. You know what I mean? Like in his tenure in Dallas, because like
oh
remember when he
yeah,
took over the team, they were awful, like bottom of the barrel, like so just like the things he's been able to pull off in his. I mean, it's been a long time. It's got to be close to 10 years he's been there now. So like he's had a long time to build a team, and like he's made honestly like more right decisions than not.
oh yeah, definitely.
It's just like the two things I have you can call into question is like his handling of the goaltending situation this year. And I mean, and that this is before we found out that Ben Bishop wasn't going to be able to play. So we would have had a four-headed monster. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah,
So like that just seems like I mean, like you said, like two goalies essentially were question marks. Ben Bishop and Anton Khudobin were question marks, like when they would come back. But you have Jake Ottinger, who's proven he can do it. So like bringing on Braden Holtby was kind of weird, but like whatever. And his like this I don't know if it's like his lack of like ability to find a good coach or if like he's just not very good at it. You know what I mean? Because like he doesn't seem to make great decisions in the coaching department. I mean, he lucked out with Jim Montgomery. He hit a home run with that, but like otherwise, I can't really think of any of the other coaches in Dallas who having like like a lot of success or like any memorable tenure. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah. I mean, and I'm not taking anything away from his legacy in Dallas, right?
Oh yeah, no.
But there is also something to be said that sometimes, as a GM, you get too invested in your image, and so you kind of forget what's going on. It's kind of like when Steve Eisman left Tampa, right? Like nobody had any qualms about like almost anything that Steve Eisman had done in Tampa. Like let's be honest here, I would argue like 85 to 90% of the success that Julian Breezeball has had that team is because of the work that Steve Eisman put in,
I mean,
right?
I'll take it one further than you. I mean, I'll give it all to Steve Eiserman. Like Steve Eiserman did all the legwork and like drafting and developing all that talent and building. You know what I mean? Like he drafted Nikita Kucherov, he drafted Braden Point, he drafted like I don't know if he drafted Victor Hedman. I think he came on after Victor Hedman had already been drafted. But you know, and like what did Breezeball realistically do? Add like Barclay Goodrow and like some role players and toughen the team up a little bit.
Which, not to undersell that, obviously, because that was a very important reason as to why they've won back-to-back cups. But
But
yeah,
like
like 90% of the team was.
I mean, he inherited a Ferrari and he just put new gaskets on like the engine, you know, like to soup it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to derail you there.
No, you're good. It's just like when Steve Eisman left Tampa Bay, right? He resigned, right? Um, Nobody was saying, "Oh, he's done anything bad. He can't do it," or whatever the case is. But there was some people that were saying, like, he built the team, and we just need like somebody maybe to take a look at it from a new perspective and add that one or two little pieces, right? Which I feel like is largely what I'm trying to say about Jim Nils. Like he's done a really really good job, but maybe he's starting to lose focus just a little bit, and some things are starting to get blurry and hazy, like you said, like his inability to find a coach. Like maybe he's starting to lose sight of like what his roster is as opposed to what he wants it to be. And so he's trying to look for coaches for a roster that he thinks he's going to have as opposed to the roster that he does have. And maybe that's why there's a mismatch there. It just seems like there's a disconnect, right? Like there's a wire that's unplugged in Dallas, and it's given him a lot of problems. And unfortunately, it's not really going to get that much better immediately anyway this season, considering that the rumors are that John Klingberg is on his way out of Dallas, right? Like
Yeah, and he's on an expiring contract, right?
I believe that's
Or he has
why,
one
yeah.
more. It's
Um,
like it's one of the two. He doesn't want to sign in Dallas.
like I said, unfortunately, our good friends at Cap Friendly are having a
Currently
problem.
down. Yeah.
His contract expires this year, so he's signed for this year, 4.25, and then he's a UFA. So understandably, they don't really want to pay him that much. Um, but also like for a team that's in the window that the Dallas Stars are in, where they should be competing, you can't just lose somebody like John Klingberg and go, all right, you know, no
And
biggie.
yeah, he is a big piece of the roster, all things considered.
Like you have to replace him, which sucks because you're basically going to spend assets to make a lateral move at that point, which is rough.
You know what might be an interesting match made though for them? I don't know if Nashville would be particularly interested anymore because wait, do they still have Matisse Ekholm? Yeah, right. They managed to sign him.
I'm almost positive, yeah, because
I
it
was gonna
was,
say like,
yeah, he's still there. He's on an expiring contract as well, though.
see, there you go. Isn't that kind of
Um,
a wouldn't that be kind of an interesting? I mean, I know you'd be losing the offense that John Klingberg
actually,
brings.
oh no, they have him on. Sorry, not to cut you off. I
No,
made a
you're good.
mistake. He's on an extension, so next year the $6.25 million extension kicks in.
And I mean, I don't know. I feel like that'd be a decent attempt by Dallas to try and mitigate. I mean, it would, like you said, it'd be a lateral move. Like it would be one top four defenseman for another. You'd be sacrificing some offense, but you'd be gaining a little more defensive stability, which might also be something you'd want to do with this team, considering they can't score all that much anyway. So you might want to just load up on as much defense as you can and try to win as many games, 2-1, 3-2 as you can, you know? Because let's be honest, this isn't going to be a team that's running and gunning with like the Edmonton Oilers or like the Chicago Blackhawks, you know?
Yeah. I think certainly, if not immediately for this season, maybe Dallas just says, "Listen, we're not going to make the playoffs." Like they're not that far out of it, all things considered. Like they technically have a winning record right now.
And they just happen
They're
to be in a tough division.
19, 16, and 2, so they're only 4 points out of the wild card. Actually, they're only 4 points out of the wild card with several games in hand, but it doesn't feel like it, does it? Like it doesn't really feel like this team is all that good, which is weird. It's certainly. I'll put it this way: as good as this team might be on paper, like in terms of the standings, it feels like a team that needs to have something happen, right?
Definitely feels like there needs, yeah, something has to happen.
So I guess we'll kind of wrap up the podcast here on this little note because we are starting to get up to that hour mark. Outside of the 1-for-1 for Matthias Ekholm, where do you think John Klingberg's going to go? He's kind of the first big bait that we've seen on the trade deadline board, as it were. I just throw some names out. Where do you think
I
he
mean,
should go? Or.
unfortunately, the Edmonton Oilers have been an early team that's been linked to him, and it's like, oh my God, you don't need another puck movie. You're just signing a better Tyson Barrie. Like you'd be trading for a better Tyson Barrie. I don't get it. But I mean, a team that could really use a guy like him. I mean, I think realistically, like a young team that's like right on the edge, like a team. I don't think the Rangers would be a good fit, but I mean like a team in a situation like the Rangers. You know what I mean? Who are getting ready to take that like next step and be competitive. I think he could be like a really nice. I mean, like the Florida Panthers could use him. It'd be a really nice piece. Number two power play behind Ekblad, number three defenseman. Bring some, not necessarily like stalwart defensive game, but a decent enough defensive game, and like he would honestly probably help to put that team into like what I would consider like a surefire Stanley Cup contender. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think Florida would be cool.
I feel like a team like LA might be a decent fit for him because LA looks like they're getting ready to turn around in the next couple of years. I think in like 2 or 3 years from now, LA's gonna be a playoff team like consistently. He could really help them. I mean, especially when he'd be taking over the number one power play from Drew Doughty, who isn't the offensive dynamo he once was either.
What about this is an interesting one, I think, because it's not necessarily a thing that like they need to address, so to speak. But I think Calgary would be an interesting one.
I mean, it
Um,
would definitely be it would definitely address like losing Giordano and Dougie Hamilton in like such short order. You know what I mean? Like losing both your number one power play quarterbacks. I mean, like there have been guys that have taken over and played well for them. I mean, so it's not necessarily like something that needs to be done, but like it's definitely something that would be nice. I mean, I think it would bump Calgary into that next level, like instead of a bubble playoff team into like a team that's like actually ready to go. You know what I mean? Like especially in a weak Pacific Division. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah. You sorry, go ahead. You
no, so I have to imagine a team like Vegas is going to kick the tires on it because Vegas is in. I mean, I know they're a cap team, but like they're always in on guys who hit the open market, especially like defensemen.
Yeah, I mean, I think Calgary would be a great fit because they don't really have like a puck mover outside of like Noah Hannafin. Because you have like Zadorov, Chris Tanev, Michael Stone, Rasmus Anderson, Erica Branson. Like, you have a lot of like defensive defensemen. Whereas Klingberg can come in and like we saw him like I think it was like either last year or 2 years ago like almost break 10 goals on just on his own. Um, I think it would address kind of like a need they have in a back end. I mean, I not that Carolina's going to really rock the boat, but I think Carolina could be interesting. Um, I don't
Yeah,
know
I
if
mean, it
they'll
would
really
be.
be in on it,
I mean,
but
I feel like Carolina would realistically only be in on it as a rental. I don't know if they'd be willing to pay him the kind of
no,
money
probably not. No.
because, like, I mean, they're gonna have to contend with that Kakaniemi contract in the off season, and like, no matter what they do, they have to pay him at least what he's making this year. You know what I mean? So, because the qualifying offer is going to be $6 million.
Yeah.
So, like, that's
Yeah.
the starting point for negotiations for any arbiter. So, if that thing goes to negotiation, like, you have to at least pay him 6 million. But yeah, I don't know. There's a couple interesting. I mean, like the Islanders definitely would be an interesting one. I don't know if the Islanders have like the necessarily trade capital to be able to move for a guy like John Klingberg, just in terms of like the assets they have. Like they'd have to be trading like pieces off their team.
Hmm.
And I don't know if the Islanders would really be in a position to do that. Like if they'd be better for it. Um,
If
but
Noah
like
Dobson was playing the way he played last year, I would say yes, but because he's so much better this year, probably not. But I wouldn't say no. I mean,
no, yeah,
we could try to swing a deal and involve some of the younger guys. Like we'd try to dangle like Kiefer Bellows or Anthony Beauvillier like out in front of them, and kind of see if they take it. I mean, it's really gonna depend on how desperate Dallas is to move him, right? Because like it's either you move him, you pay him, or
Or
you
he
lose him for
walks.
nothing.
Yeah. Here's another interesting one. A team that's not necessarily like in any position to be winning, but like, what about Montreal? I
I
mean,
think
it'd
Montreal
be a
would be
nice fit.
interesting because you did lose Shea Weber, right, to an unfortunate semi-early retirement. I think he could have gone another couple of years. I don't think he could have played like another 10 years, like people were saying. But um, you did lose Shea Weber. My only question, if for trading for him for Montreal, would be, would he re-sign there? Because if not, then it
There's
would be
no
the kind of
point.
thing
Yeah.
you'd almost have to try to convince Dallas to sign an extension and then trade him to you. You know,
Yeah. More or less. You'd have to have Dallas negotiating on your behalf.
essentially. Because I got
Yeah.
to
I
be
mean,
honest,
and it's a
like,
hard sell.
yeah, yeah.
I was just
If
thinking more from like a roster fit perspective, like how interesting that would be. But yeah, no, like there's realistically no reason for John Klingberg to want to stay in Montreal.
I'll give you the biggest reason why not, honestly, is because we don't know what's going on with Carey Price.
Yeah.
Like, if Carey Price was still the Carey Price we know he can be, and he was, still playing and still playing phenomenal, but the team around him was just failing, I think it would be a much easier sell because it's like, look what we did 2 years ago or last year when Carey was at the top of his game. That can always happen again. But now
Right.
it's like, and I'm not taking anything away from Carey Price. He did what he had to do. He made a smart decision to go into the player assistance program. Absolutely respect the hell out of it. But from a hockey perspective, it's harder to sell you on the Montreal Canadiens when it's like, not now you don't even have the elite goaltender that you had who was kind of carrying the team. And then there's not much else to really look forward to because as great of a players as I think they will be, even guys like Cole Caulfield and Nick Suzuki have been incredibly underwhelming.
I
So it's
mean, Cole
like,
Caulfield got sent to the AHL this year, so
yeah. There's plenty of options. Obviously, we'll kind of keep an eye on it as it gets closer. Is there any kind of last minute things you wanted to talk about before we wrapped up?
I guess I just want to make a quick comment on Edmonton continues to be coach killers. They're about to, I think, what is it? The quote was that they're playing it day by day with their coaching situation. So essentially, what they're saying is they're waiting for one bad game and they're gonna can uh, Tippett, which is like if you're already convinced you need to fire him, why don't you just fire him now? Like you don't need much of an excuse. You've been terrible for the last 2 months, and like the one thing you're supposed to be able to do, you can't do.
Just score
So
goals.
yeah. So I guess that's really it. Just Edmonton continues to be Edmonton.
We'll certainly keep an eye on them as the trade deadline comes closer. We'll see if they make a move for a goaltender, perhaps, which they desperately need, or a defensive defenseman, perhaps, which they desperately need. But knowing them, they'll trade for a scoring winger. So,
I mean, they want to sign Evander Kane apparently, so
yeah. Um, Next week, we'll probably do our halfway mark podcast. By that point, most teams will have crossed that threshold. A handful of teams are already at that threshold. So we'll do our 41 game podcast next week. And then after that, probably starting to look at trade deadline stuff. So, yeah, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys again next time.